Today on Hottype.
If you feel a presence, it's your soul.
The best-selling writer and world-famous spiritual doctor Deepak Chopra asks, is there life after death? To answer the question, Chopra criticizes not only science, but in his most controversial words to date, he criticizes religion as well.
I think religions are obsolete. They're divisive, quarrelsome, idiotic.
One, two.
Hottype with Evan Solomon.
Deepak Chopra has been described as many things: writer, philosopher, doctor. But the word I would use to describe him is fearless, because over 40 books, he's taken on some of the world's most difficult philosophical problems, resolving the mind-body issue, how to stay young. But with his new book, he's taking on perhaps the most difficult problem of all, life after death, the burden of proof. And in the process, he challenges not only organized religion, but organized science. Chopra believes that birth and death are merely part of a continuum, not beginning and end points. And in his new book, he argues that science confirms this belief. Now, for a man who has become famous for reconciling medicine, after all, Chopra is a trained doctor, with the health benefits of spirituality, his views on death are welcomed by his legions of fans.
Your mind is a conversation that happens in the presence of your consciousness, of your soul.
To find out more about this book, I sat down with Chopra recently at the Hammam Spa in Toronto, and he told me that his quest to find out about life after death began with two events: the death of his father and George W. Bush's inauguration.
I, George Walker Bush.
About 5 years ago, on the very day that George W. Bush got elected to the White House, my father passed away. Very interesting. He watched the inaugural ceremony in India on CNN, and at the end of it, he told my mother, he said, "I think I'm leaving." No, honestly.
You don't think there's a connection there, do you?
I think that, in a universe of interdependent co-arising, I think he left at a perfect time.
Only you would see this connection.
He watched it, he looked at my mother, he said, "Time to leave," closed his eyes, and in his meditation he passed. And it was kind of very ironic that he looks at the inaugural ceremony and he says, "Time to leave."
So, most people, when they confront the death of a parent, there's a moment of grief. You have this story about George Bush, you have this sense. Have you learned not to fear death, Deepak? Or even grieve death?
If death is untimely, if death involves a lot of suffering, I think one would grieve it and even fear it. But if death is as elegant as life was for my father, his life was elegant, his death was elegant. And the simplicity of it was its elegance. I thought it was celebration.
So what happens when you die, Deepak?
What happens when you die is you return to where you always are. If you realize right now that there is no such thing as a person, you'll be all set.
What do you mean I'll be all set?
Then you shift your identity to that consciousness that is differentiating as observer and observed, and there's nothing to fear.
There's no fear.
Absolutely.
You have no fear of death.
No, sir. Why? Because I don't exist in the first place.
Do you get
reincarnated
as a soul?
Wisps of memory and threads of desire, which are specks of information, latch on to specks of consciousness and show up as recycled human beings. But in the bigger picture, the observer, the observed, the process of observation is a single reality.
But so Deepak Chopra, as I know him,
doesn't
my friend
exist.
Deepak, doesn't exist.
A transient behavior of the total universe. For me, if you can see it and touch it and think about it and conceptualize it and experience it through your senses, that is not real.
So this, when I touch you, this isn't real?
No. Now, if I really understand this, and this is my lifelong study, I'm telling you, everything that you see, touch, smell, taste, and experience as a world is a projection of something that cannot be conceptualized, cannot be visualized, cannot be seen, touched, but without which there would be no conceptualization, no visualization, no perception, and that's consciousness.
Chopra believes that peak experiences, like having sex or playing sports or even meditating, can offer a window into undifferentiated consciousness, or what he calls in the book, akasha. But what exactly is this concept of akasha? For Chopra, it's like an energy that connects everything together. But as you can tell, it can be a difficult concept to get your mind around.
It's the ground of existence of everything. It's, you know, it's earth, air, fire, water. It's your mind, it's your body, it's your emotions, it's your perception, it's your behavior, it's your social interactions, it's your environment, it's your biology, it's the forces of nature.
I mean, you mean we're connected to everything? I'm connected to the light stand and to the belt buckle, that kind of stuff?
You are the light stand. You're not connected to it. You're the eyes of the universe looking at itself as the light stand. Aren't you? I mean, aren't you a behavior of the universe? Whatever worldview you buy, your eyes are the eyes of the universe. And when you look at an object, it's the universe looking at itself through those eyes. And so the universe looks at itself through an infinity of perspectives.
Chopra realizes that this way of looking at the world might sound strange in the West, where the Judeo-Christian worldview about God is predominant. And it's a Western view that Chopra is not afraid to challenge.
I think the difference between Judeo-Christian theology is that some God, a paternal figure, usually white and male, at least conceptualized, even though if you did, you know, a DNA analysis of Jesus Christ, the DNA would be closer to some of the...
I look more like you than me.
Well, more like the Middle East terrorists, actually, because, you know, Arabs and Jews are the same gene, basically. They're both, what do you call it? Semites. But, you know, we've created this idea of God, you know, where people conceptualize God as a blue-eyed blonde born in Manhattan. And he's sitting up there in the sky and he's creating the universe.
With miracles.
With miracles.
With the odd intervention.
Yeah. Now, the difference between that and the Eastern view is God did not create the universe. God became the universe. So being becomes. And therefore, the universe is a biological organism which is a differentiated expression of a universal consciousness. And it's a very amazing experience because it's set up for maximum diversity. Now that's an amazing way to look at the world. It solves all the dilemmas, solves all the suffering.
It sounds good, but you know, then you're confronted with the old problem that every theology and every system of philosophy has to deal with, which is not the death of someone like your father, the elegant death, but the death of the innocent child. How does the notion of undifferentiated consciousness that you talk about deal with that?
When I see myself in everybody, including that child, then my very nature is one of loving kindness, compassion, which compels me to do something about it, okay, to actually have love in action. You know, the saying is, action without love is meaningless, and love without action is irrelevant. But if I can get to that state of undifferentiated consciousness where I see that these are all different aspects of my own self, then my very nature is love, compassion, understanding, creativity, and wanting to help.
Great conversation going there with Deepak Chopra, but when we come back, he takes on organized religion head on, and believe me, you don't want to miss that, so stick around.
You know, what is religious, organized religion? Power mongering, cronyism, influence peddling, corruption, and hypocrisy.